me start off by saying I'm stressed. If you've been anywhere near social media or regular media for that matter, you've no doubt seen that demonstrations and protests have erupted nationwide. I'm so encouraged by the progress that we've made through demonstrations, through voting, through activism, and there's only more work to do. But I'm stressed. I'm Black. I'm a Black lesbian woman living in a racist, homophobic, sexist society where people like me don't usually get the opportunity to live the American dream. Over the past month, I've seen violence meted out by the LA Sheriff's Department and the LAPD that I could not have imagined. The idea that we're still here, still suffering oppression and violence under an institution whose roots are in the tradition of slave catching, that we're still here is honestly chilling. So I'm trying to combat my anxiety and the stress that I'm feeling in this moment, this weird year of 2020, by adding my voice, just one more voice, to the conversation, with the hope that I can add some consciousness raising thoughts and examinations, if only to my own small sphere. We know that the protests that have erupted nationwide have been in response to individual acts of state violence, like the murders of Breonna Taylor in Kentucky and George Floyd in Minneapolis. But they've also been kind of independent of these latest examples of violence. These protests have cut to the core of a sickness that exists in American society, a sickness that's been examined by Black radicals in the Black radical tradition since the time of Reconstruction, a sickness that I think white America is only now becoming truly aware of. And that sickness is structural state violence, the institutions of racism that underpin our whole society. It's Pride Month, and once again, for those who missed it, I'm a Black lesbian. This is my channel, and so I want to talk to you about a favorite thinker, philosopher, and freedom fighter of mine who also happens to be a Black lesbian woman. You've heard of Angela Davis. One thing that I think we all need to remain aware of is these deep channels that have been excavated by the civil rights movement of the 20th century and that have been excavated by the Black Lives Matter movement that kind of kicked off during the Obama administration. These deep channels that these movements have excavated into the American consciousness are what's allowing the torrent of activism that we're seeing today. It's allowing that torrent to have a place to flow and to affect the change that we've seen really explode over the last few weeks. And Angela's life is a great representation of the direct line that exists between the civil rights movement of the 20th century and what we're seeing on the streets of the US today. Keep in mind, Angela Davis was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1944. Birmingham, Alabama is famous for the brutal racial apartheid that existed during the 20th century when Angela lived there with her family. That world, which is so starkly alien to us today, a world of state-sanctioned racism, was her reality as a young girl. Angela talks about how her mother would comfort her when she couldn't go to whites-only amusement parks or zoos by telling little Angela that this is not the way that things should be, and that this is not the way that things always will be. And so one of the gifts that Angela and all of our foremothers and forefathers in the civil rights struggle give us is the gift of imagination. Even though we live in a time where state-sponsored violence is endemic, we have to be brave enough to imagine a future where this isn't the case. We can and we must imagine a Los Angeles where police helicopters aren't passing overhead every hour. We can and we must imagine a world where police aren't geared up with militarized equipment, raining down terror on American cities in broad daylight on broadcast news. We can and we must imagine a world where the United States does not incarcerate 25% of the world's incarcerated population of 10 million people. We can and we must imagine that future for the work that we do today to be successful. What Angela came to be most noted for was her incarceration. She was involved with the Communist Party and the Black Panther Party in the 1960s, and her involvement with those political groups, as well as some of her other political involvements, led to her being prosecuted for for capital offenses here in California. Her incarceration ended only because a massive worldwide movement for her freedom was undertaken by people all over the world. In her writing, Angela again and again reminds us that it's not the singular icon that should be celebrated, but the power of the collective to affect change. Angela probably wouldn't like seeing her face on my hoodie, and that's okay. In her collection of essays and speeches, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Angela tells us that what I do want people to remember is that the movement around the demand for my freedom was victorious, thanks to the movement I am here with you today. Our society values the individual over almost all else. In this movement, we have to remember the collective and maintain class consciousness, not only so that we don't overly venerate singular icons and fall into old traps that were laid during the 20th century civil rights movement, but also to continue to bring people into the movement who would otherwise sit on the sidelines. It's not enough to convict the cops that killed George Floyd. It's not enough to convict the cops who killed Breonna Taylor. Even when police are indicted, it can't be seen as enough to signal foundational change in the system. Sister Angela tells us that movements are most powerful when they begin to affect the vision of people who see themselves as outside of the movement. And that's what we're seeing today. It seems the mainstream population, frankly, the white population of this country, is beginning to become conscious of this class consciousness that Angela and the Black radical tradition has been talking about all along. If we continue to infuse class consciousness and consciousness of systemic racism within today's movement, it feels like the world we imagine might soon be the one that we inhabit. Thanks for watching this video. It's the first in a series, so look out for another one next week. Happy Pride and stay safe.